and that is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may dull.
Hello, hello! Welcome back to Let's Talk H.P. Lovecraft. It's been about a week and a half since the last time I did one of these. Can't promise that I'm going to get back to near daily reviews, but I will try to get one in every week and a half. Just been so busy doing a lot of other things, that I want to talk about on video, and as a result, the Lovecraft project has sort of slowed down, but I do promise you that I will get through it. I will review every single short story in the complete fiction of H.P. Lovecraft. And continuing that, today with The Nameless City, published November 1921 in the Wolverine, an amateur press. And it is often considered the first tale in his Cthulhu Mythos. And you'll find out why in the course of this video. So as for the plot, we have an unnamed narrator who is an explorer, and he heads out into the Arabian desert on his camel to explore a ruin that is believed to be far older than even ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. It's so old that its name, the Nameless City, has been forgotten among men or was never known by men. And he's there to explore. As he's rooting around in the surface ruins, a gust of wind that's sort of unexplainable because the wind is otherwise still in the area. It disturbs his camel, so he follows it to its source, which is an opening in the rock, revealing a sort of a temple cave. He begins to explore the cave, and whereas on the surface, in the surface ruins, the artwork has been worn smooth by the blasting of sand for thousands or even millions of years. Down here, he begins to see frescoes and bas-reliefs that show him the history of these beings. We learned that it was a coastal city before the continents changed their shape, which tells you how old it actually was. Eventually, the changes of the continents led it to this coastal city becoming landlocked and in a desert. But the result of this climate change, if you will, all the rage right now, is that this civilization goes into a long, slow decline. The tunnels themselves that he begins to explore all have low ceilings because it seems the inhabitants were a reptilian species millions of years ago, but looked sort of like a crocodile meets a seal, if that makes any sense. But they were crawling creatures, so the structures were built to meet their needs rather than human needs. We walk upright. And it's kind of funny to think about that because every time we usually write science fiction and fantasy, we usually conceive of the intelligent beings being in some way bipedal humanoid, and we don't think of anything else being capable of building. But here you have totally unhumanoid creatures that are building cities. The narrator finds a sort of hallway that is lined with these sort of glass and wooden caskets, so you can see through them and you can see these creatures behind the glass, still dressed in their ornamental ceremonial robes and gears, and sort of shows an evolution of the species and of preserves its history. Sort of reminds you of like walking through a museum even. At the utmost bottom, furthest reaches of this tunnel, he comes to a set of doors which he cannot budge, but they are open. And beyond the doors is sort of a pool of infinite light. A wind suddenly rushes back past him. He hears voices in the in the lit up area, the paradise, if you will. And it's the souls of the beings still alive, even to this day, alive in some form or another, having perhaps transcended their bodies, which were no longer suited to the environment. They seem to hate humanity for its usurping of the earth, but here they are, nonetheless, still conscious, and in great fear of this realization of this what do you call it? This event. The narrator, he can only think of one thing, and he's repeating it over and over in his mind. He's repeating a couplet written by the mad Arab Al-Harazad. This is not dead which can eternal lie, and with stranger aeons even death may die. A very famous couplet from the work of H.P. Lovecraft. Quick analysis. The setup for this story reminds me a little bit of the 1999 Brendan Fraser version of The Mummy, just in that here's somebody going into a feared and abandoned city that should not exist, and discovering that there is still a power beneath the surface at work. But of course, situationally, it is a city that is much older than Egypt even, and it's actually interesting that Lovecraft mentions Egypt and also Mesopotamia to give it a real-world grounding, but as he often does, it's actually a mixed reality, because he mingles real places and real history with fictional people and places, such as he references Sarnath, Nar, and Ib, which are all locations from his dream cycle. Also, as a reference point, if you've read through much of Lovecraft's work, and you'll probably know that At the Mountains of Madness is sort of the crown jewel, the big, longest work of his. It reminds me very much of that story, in that it's the same sort of premise of an explorer going to a forbidden place, to a unforgiving place, coming across what appears to be ruins, using the artwork to sort of tell the tale of the old civilization, and then ultimately finding the creatures to still be alive in one form or another. So it's very much like At the Mountains of Madness. But I might actually go so far as saying that it's possibly a better written story than At the Mountains of Madness. At the Mountains of Madness is basically a novella. It's not that long, but it feels much longer than it is, and at times it's sort of infuriating to read. It's Lovecraft is best when he's being concise. That is what I've found so far. And although most people swear by At the Mountains of Madness, I think it is a great concept. And I love what it reveals about his world, his Cthulhu Mythos world. But I would say it's weak in many places. Cut 10, 15 pages out of At the Mountains of Madness, and it's probably a much better story. And that is what the Nameless City ultimately is for me. One last point. This story introduced, of course, the mad Arab Al-Hazred, who will eventually be known as the author of the fictional book, the Necronomicon, which is so important to Lovecraft's work. So it's cool to be reading Lovecraft's stories chronologically. Okay, I have read and reviewed a few of his stories from later in his career already, but now I'm going back through chronologically. So it's interesting to see how this universe of his is taking shape. First, you get into some of the dream cycle stuff, and then you have a story like this where he's first beginning to mention what becomes the Cthulhu Mythos, but he's laying the groundwork by creating these fictional books and people and places which are beginning to come together. So this is actually the point, I would say, at which the dream cycle and the Cthulhu Mythos touch tentacles, if you will. You know, they tread the same universe, and knowing that makes reading The Nameless City and reading Lovecraft all the more interesting as I continue to get my education in Lovecraft, one story at a time, roughly one each week. So that has been my thoughts and analysis of The Nameless City by H.P. Lovecraft. It's a good one. Got a little bit bored recently with some of the Lovecraft. I'm committed to reading all these stories. So I have to take the good with the bad. This one is certainly among the good, and it's one of the ones I think that will become a rereadable Lovecraft story for me. Years from now, I'll go back through this book, and there'll be stories I skip. This one, I will not. So if you enjoyed this review, if you enjoyed this story, if you enjoy what I'm doing here at Let's Talk, please subscribe. Please give this video a thumbs up. And until next time, keep it creepy.